All right, I think we're live. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 456. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. Document description beneath the video for you to follow along with. If you want to engage in a discussion and get on the panel, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Just give me one more, give me a few more seconds. Let me just grab one more link to share with you all, and then we'll get started. All right. All right, we'll get started. All right, man. As usual, man. Today is a Black Blockchain Talk. So I've been away the last week or so because we've been, or at least I've been on the continent, chopping up some serious game, and they are 10 toes down invested into blockchain over there. They consider blockchain to be a tool of Pan-Africanism. So there was several panel discussions about blockchain and its implementation on the continent and how it could actually, one, get rid of corruption within the bureaucracy, and number two, how it could actually be leveraged to advance Africans or Black people into the 21st century from an infrastructure standpoint. So this is about digital transformation that they're referring to. And so in these discussions that we've been having, I decided to keep the momentum going by taking some time out and actually putting a focus on African blockchain chat just for tonight. See if anybody's in waiting room. Nope. All right. And so the first thing we're going to start off with is the next summit, which is going to be in Atlanta. I think, you know, some of you all in the South should actually attend it. I'll share my screen. You can see my screen. This is Black Wealth and Blockchain 2020. And this is going to be in Atlanta. And I just want to read the caption real quick. Did you know blockchain is expected to be a $3.1 trillion industry in the next few years? And non-tech professionals, including writers, educators, human resource professionals, lawyers, project managers, and others are going to make billions from this technology. It's time for us to get a piece of the pie. Come to Black Wealth Plus Blockchain Conference 2020 to learn what blockchain is and how you can benefit from this technology. So this is what they're talking about. Black people in the South, especially taking the bull by the horns on this. I'm not in the South. I won't be able to attend this one because it's too soon. If it was a few weeks out, I would actually jump on it, but I just came back, so I can't actually attend it. But this is in the docket, so make sure you click on that and register. If you're in Atlanta, I would definitely jump on it. All right, so that is that. The next item on the docket is Blockchain Africa Conference 2020. Blockchain technology beyond the hype. This one is going to be in South Africa for 2 days. We're going to have 500 delegates, 30 speakers, 30 exhibitors, and 30 different countries are going to show up. I do know a few people who are listed here. So this is going to be really good. I saw this sister right here. I think she's from GNH Blockchain Group, which is her blockchain, if I remember correctly. Workshops, networking, exhibitions, global experts and thought leaders. Definitely going to be dope. If you haven't been to the continent before, this will be a great time to actually go. So they talk about all the use cases: self-sovereign identity, SSI, decentralized finance, so DeFi, trade and finance, access to financial services, cross-border payments, healthcare, social good, record keeping and auditing, food tracking and traceability, and supply chain management. So, you know, these are all the use cases right off the top that's going to be impacted by blockchain. And, you know, this is where we're moving to. You know, if we're talking about reparations for foundational Black Americans or American descendants of slaves, the way you dole out reparations is going to be through blockchain. And the way you identify descendants of slaves in America would be through a blockchain mechanism. That's how you're going to have, you know, these sort of public records and private transformations of the wealth. The compensation will be private, but the records would be kept public for people to see who the real true descendants of slaves. So this is what blockchain is going to be useful for. So everybody is going to benefit from blockchain in one way, shape, or form, and I think that it is imperative for foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slaves, whatever hashtag you want to use, to identify yourself with, to actually leverage the technology to your advantage. Now is the time to actually do it. All right. So that's happening March 11th to March 12th. Let me acknowledge the people in the chat. Black Scorpion, what's up? Mega Montana, peace. Thai City, peace to you. Black Man Friday, what up? JD Orca, shalom. Engineering Cannabis, what's going on? Devo Foster, what's up? Addo, good evening to you. Woman of the Past, good evening to you. Johnny Blaze, what's going on? All right. Link is in the chat for you to click on if you want to join the panel discussion tonight. All right. I see we got 2 thumbs down already. I know who they are now. I know who they are now. All right. Next item on the docket is from Business Insider. Blockchain, can Africa successfully leapfrog its way into the future? So these are the sort of discussions that they're having. But let me expand this out. Blockchain is the current hot topic across the globe right now, not excluding Africa. The biggest 2019 news surrounding blockchain had to be controversial Libra project. The Libra Association, co-founded by Facebook, said the new cryptocurrency would help the world's unbanked to enter the financial system, citing 1.7 billion adults without bank accounts who could use the virtual currency. Before the inaugural meeting, the association was hit by some significant partnership losses. 7 of the original 28 founding partners, including MasterCard, eBay, Stripe, and Visa, bowed out from the project. It was recently announced that Vodafone quit, making it a total of 8 companies to have abandoned the project. The problem, Libra had attracted regulatory scrutiny following from expresses reservation from governments and banks across the world. Since its inception in 2008, blockchain has been deeply rooted in the tech community's vocabulary. However, given the hype that surrounds it, we haven't seen a widespread adoption of it yet. Perhaps this is due to the current perception of the blockchain technology. For the moment, it continues to feel like a luxury rather than a household name. So what's blockchain? At last year's Africa Tech Summit, Kigali, I was actually there. Speaking of that, Marvin Colby of Raise gave a simplified definition as the technology that allows us to transfer assets of value over the internet. One of the unique offerings of blockchain is that it allows information to be distributed but not copied, meaning that each individual piece of information can only have one owner at a time. Introduced purely as a peer-to-peer version of electronic cash, blockchain technology has evolved into one of today's groundbreaking emerging technologies, thanks to its innovative elements, which includes decentralization, transparency, immutability, and automation. These characteristics can be implemented into any industry, from pharmaceutical, financial, logistics, to educational institutions. With the potential to create multiple use cases, one can't help but wonder what the future of blockchain entails for Africa. The continent is embracing technological change at a quicker rate, meaning that with blockchain, Africa potentially has a good shot at successfully leapfrogging its way into the future without making huge mistakes. Ahead of Africa Tech Summit Kigali, some industry leaders and speakers of the event gave insight of the future of blockchain on the continent. I spoke about this earlier, that the event that I went to, which is Africa Tech Summit, they talked about blockchain extensively, and this article is kind of co-signing exactly what I was just saying earlier. Ben Onoa, founder of African Blockchain Alliance, said the biggest benefits for blockchain are in the financial services sectors, especially in remittances and payments using blockchain and other digital tokens. People often find it difficult to move money around within the continent, so they resort to various blockchain platforms for this. For payments, a lot of African merchants use Bitcoin to pay for imports from Asia. Akin Sawyer, strategy and governance lead for Decred, said the biggest use case for blockchain is cryptocurrencies, non-sovereign distributed digital money. He says the cryptocurrencies that are leading the charge are stores of value that have fixed and verifiable monetary policies and are significantly decentralized to avoid collusion and capture, and are secure enough to resist double spending on other forms of attack. Jens Glassel, CEO and founder of Blockbonds, commented on blockchain's use case, saying that the list of almost endless but narrowed it down to ID and enabling secure and reliable transaction contracts between two parties. It's no surprise that blockchain's most popular application on the continent is said to be financial services. It enables the existence of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, its most popular cryptocurrency and the one for which the technology was created. Research from Luno's The Future of Money report revealed that As large global tech firms move into blockchain altcoins, early adopters will probably come from emerging markets. However, despite its rising popularity, there are concerns regarding the vulnerabilities in cryptocurrency. Blockchain has caught the attention of regulators, most especially because it is the foundational technology behind the cryptocurrencies. Despite being hailed the solution for everything, there is still a lack of awareness of the technology outside of the banking and how it works. In order to promote the use of blockchain outside of cryptocurrencies, businesses and governments must work together. Governments should, first of all, avoid being too quick to enact legislation and policies that could stifle adoption and innovation, said Sawyer. They should first deploy time and resources to understand the technology and support civil organizations and companies that are investing in this space. Lending weight to the argument, Honors, as when they've understood it and how it can help them in governance, they need to then lead by implementing various blockchain pilots and phases, just like Dubai, Singapore, and China, and others. Within this approach, they can better create legislation that will enable blockchain solutions and startups to thrive. Glasso also confirms this approach and considers what's at stake if governments do not embrace forward-thinking technologies, he argues. My impression is that the regulators and governments have understood that if they fail to take advantage of the data they already have, there is a bold risk that they will fall even further behind. Taking a role in guiding banks to digitize their platforms is crucial if they are going to be able to handle the expected population growth and urbanization, which is coming over the next years. General consensus is that education levels for blockchain across the continent is relatively low, although Honorable Michael Oyango, Ministry of ICT Kenya, believes different countries are at different levels because of the priorities laid out by different governments. Education levels will only be driven when citizens understand how these technologies can can impact and improve their lives. And as such, many of their other players over and above governments need to get involved. For Glasso, he believes it is very strong in some groups, but still has a long way to go for reaching general acceptance. The full impact of blockchain-driven technologies still remain to be discovered by the world. People need to be exposed to more useful products. Here, governments can do more to support companies like Spin. And this is a very good point because we talked about this before, but private and public sector partnerships is really going to drive the adoption better rather than governments to have a top-down approach. Because as the article is stating, there's a literacy issue when it comes to blockchain or distributed ledger technologies that most people just don't understand it. All they know is Bitcoin, but outside of the Bitcoin aspect of it, they really don't understand the abilities of blockchain in itself or distributed ledger technologies. They don't understand what its capabilities are, and they don't understand that it's actually a fundamental piece for digital transformation. On education, Sawyer believes we should be looking beyond brick and mortar schools and curriculum designed for a previous age and instead encourage curriculum that emphasizes STEM education, leveraging the internet and virtual-based education approaches to augment face-to-face interactions and, in some cases, eliminate the need for face-to-face instruction entirely. Companies such as the African Blockchain Alliance are dedicated to improving this and have trained close to 50 engineers in 2019 via the African Blockchain Developer Program with Consensus Academy. We've also done many non-tech blockchain education sessions for various groups across the continent. Such efforts for tech and non-tech training on blockchain need to be scaled up, notes Noah. So in addition to financial services, benefiting from the the technology, Sawyer speculates that the job markets will undergo the greatest disruption. Adding blockchains will expand the demand for distributed work, which presents a massive opportunity for our young African population to develop skills and find employment opportunities that are not limited to the physical geographies we live in. Reiterating blockchain's endless opportunities, Glasso concludes, the great thing is that it is not sector specific. Take ID and transactions, for example, that relates to everything from healthcare, education to financial services. Africa's blockchain potential has only just scratched the surface, and as long as many African countries embrace the technology and other emerging technologies, there lies an opportunity for the continent to build its own technological infrastructure that will power the continent. So this article, just the end of this article is actually talking about what what we've been talking about here for a long time, that blockchain is a part of digital infrastructure. You can't move forward unless you adopt blockchain. It's impossible. And so I agree with the article. I think they made some key points. We've made these same key points ourselves, very similar key points. As the article points out, education is very important. So literacy is going to be very important going forward. Maybe by 2025, maybe by 2030, if you don't know anything about blockchain, if you don't even know what blockchain is, you're going to be considered ignorant or a functional illiterate for that matter. And so no one's going to really know how to deal with you because you don't really understand the transformation that has happened or started in 2008. And if you don't have that sort of literacy, you could find yourself very well out of the job market going forward. All right. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, next item on the docket is from cointelegraph.com, unpacking the potential of blockchain and infrastructure in Africa. We just got finished talking about blockchain being a piece of infrastructure. They're putting more emphasis behind it now. The vast swath of, what's going on here? The vast swaths of Africa's fertile lands may ultimately prove a central arena for the ground-up development of innovative digital infrastructure and green energy projects. Recent pivotal movements in African trade, such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, are setting the table for an environment conducive to rapid growth, where both energy and financial infrastructure are primary focus. Africa's untapped economic potential is no secret. The continent's population has soared past more than 1.3 billion, which accounts for roughly 17% of the world's population, and is mostly comprised of young people, with 2/3 of the population below the age of 24. So a bulge in the youth of Africa has helped fuel the fastest growing mobile market in the world, but one that still lacks a robust financial infrastructure. Despite the ubiquity of mobile phones, specifically Nokia, only 6% of Africans make payments with a mobile device. So they're right about this, because most phones are just used for voice communication. That's all they use it for. Especially the dumb phones. The dumb phones don't have any other capability other than for voice communication, telephony. But that could all change soon. The opportunity for Africa lies directly within the ability to potentially leapfrog an entire generation of financial and energy infrastructure, a luxury that countries in the Western Hemisphere lack, and the world is taking notice. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was recently in mainstream headlines following an extended visit to Africa, after which he announced that he would be returning for 3 to 6 months in mid-2020. The excitement stirred by his statement centered on his ongoing work with his payments company Square and its relatively new venture oriented on blockchain, Square Crypto. Square Crypto is focusing on Bitcoin payment and investment solutions for mobile users and has garnered some impressive revenue in 2019. However, those results have largely been confined to the US, something Dorsey is seeking to change. His temporary move to Africa will likely encompass an in-depth exploration of how to improve access to financial services and assets such as Bitcoin. According to the African Development Bank report, financial inclusion in Africa, the leading prohibitive factor in more robust financial infrastructure, is inadequate access to financial services. The pieces to the puzzle for improving access are available, though. And it is precisely where Africa can break free of outdated systems like SWIFT and payment processors replete with trust issues and high fees. Blockchain firms focusing on instant, low-cost payment have subsequently swooped in and at the opportunity to craft a new kind of financial infrastructure from its foundation. This is actually a very good point. For those of you who understand what SWIFT is the legacy financial system that sits in Brussels. And so because, and this is in Europe, for those who don't understand, and because SWIFT is such an archaic system that was designed around Western dominance as a payment method or a mechanism for payment, Africa has 1.3 billion people now. By 2050, it will have something like 1.6 billion, 1.7. At that rate, you have 1/3 of the world's population sitting on the continent. You have to take into consideration that you're going to be the dominant player now. And so how do you get all these people who are unbanked to be banked? And you can do all of this without relying on the legacy European system or the Western system. You can create your own system as long as everybody can come to an agreement. And that's where blockchain comes in. Payment systems relying on blockchain can bypass conventional obstacles, embedding themselves directly into the hands of Africa. Africa's more than 456 million mobile users. Should Square Crypto expand its operation to cover the populous regions of Africa that Dorsey has hinted as the first in line for Bitcoin development, such as Nigeria? Talked about Nigeria the other day. Then direct access to Bitcoin investing, Square Crypto, and payment rails with be at the fingertips of more than 350 million unbanked adults. So 350 million people do not have bank accounts on the continent. This is a similar issue that you see in America with Black Americans, where a lot of Black Americans have to go rely on checks, cash, Western Union, and MoneyGram to cash their checks because they are unbanked. That's a serious problem. Recent research indicates that Nigerians are willing to take drastic discounts on Bitcoin purchases using the Paxful exchange primarily to circumvent remittance services like Western Union. Just talked about Western Union a second ago. And the restrictive banking infrastructure in Nigeria. Using gift cards and Bitcoin, users can diminish remittance times and avoid capital controls, according to researcher Matt Alborg. The entire remittance process can be completed in 20 to 30 minutes within the end result of local Nigerian currency arriving to the family member's bank account. So 20 to 30 minutes for a transaction to take place is quicker than the SWIFT system's 72-hour duration. That's why you'll notice that when you go cash a check or something like that at a traditional bank, it says your money should be there in a few days. A few means three being 72 hours. That's the sort of old legacy infrastructure obstacles that come into place is time. Well, when you're dealing with blockchain, you're talking about as in less than an hour, that money has been transferred and is done. The property rights afforded by Bitcoin could also have an outsized impact on long-term economic repercussions, unlocking trillions in debt capital. More capital leads to more infrastructure investment, which becomes a positive feedback loop for broader African economy. And some of that capital is already making its way to major infrastructure projects. One of the most high-profile infrastructure developments of 2019 came out of South Africa, where Meridian Economics proposed an $11 billion green energy initiative in the African nation. Funded by development, finance, and private institutions, the massive projects undertaking would include lending money to the Exxon state utility provider on the condition that it increases the pace of a coal plant closures and injects cash into renewables research and development. Interesting. The move coincides with a growing influence by China in East Africa, which has been pouring money into building infrastructure, building transportation and energy infrastructure. Today, China is the largest financier of Africa's infrastructure. The takeaway is that there is palpable interest in investing in vast sums into Africa's development, and blockchain technology is a common thread in many instances. For example, the president of China, Xi Jinping, detailed a plan to push to improve and apply blockchain technology to practical uses in everything ranging from data sharing to industrial innovation. Although China's position on renewables is still up for debate, the technological sentiment behind has been reflected in a flurry of projects implementing blockchain-based solutions that can make green energy sources a reality. For instance, Rolls-Royce has invested 5 million euros into a blockchain-oriented microgrid validation center that strives to reduce CO2 emissions, tinker with various microgrid models, and apply them to the real world. The initiative mirrors similar attempts to test the visibility of microgrids in suburbs and cities, with the idea making its way into Africa. Energy demands in Africa have far exceeded supply, especially in countries like Nigeria. As a result, microgrids have become an increasingly appealing option for people who do not have access to main electrical grids. Mostly living in rural areas, by using solar panels, blockchains help to ease the transaction cost of such microgrid marketplaces where people can buy and accept and sell excess energy using mobile applications. But most of the marked shifts in Africa's energy production will likely come from revamping primary electrical grids. Blockchains can help manage the excess waste of electricity and ease regulatory moats via more distributed systems and create regional markets for the energy chain. For example, in the United Kingdom, EDF Energy and UK Power Reserve have already traded energy market capacity obligations on the Electron blockchain platform. In the context of Africa, governments can allocate renewable energy resources more efficiently, building national systems from the ground up with reduced costs. This overcomes one of the main issues with renewable energy sources. their high rates of energy curtailment. More efficient markets can mean that less energy is accidentally or deliberately curtailed, making a green energy ROI more appealing when compared with its fossil fuel counterparts. Both blockchain technology and Africa's economic development may be in their nascent phases, but the opportunities are unmistakable. Blockchain can become a tool for the continent to bypass some of the inefficiencies plaguing the conventional financial system and collateral effects of post-industrial revolutions reliance on fossil fuels. So I talked about that earlier, that Africans see that are basically crowning blockchain as a Pan-Africanist tool. And the idea of creating these microgrids means that you have less dependency on larger state-run or state-partnered energy infrastructure systems. What happened in Puerto Rico not too long ago, an earthquake hit, and prior to that, they had a hurricane. It decimated their power infrastructure, their energy infrastructure. And so they had to narrow down their power, their energy consumption, as well as their energy infrastructure needed to be micronized. So how do you do that? Well, you have these sort of battery systems that are connected in series and are put onto a network where you can actually manage it, decentralize the management of it. And so that's what you're starting to see now. You're starting to see these big battery containers that can actually output a gigawatt of energy to a small village that has a couple of thousand people in it, where the capacity that it has readily available would actually power up those 1,000 homes within that village. Keep in mind that a village is not like what you see in America, where you see these big, massive, big mansion houses. You're talking about very small, tiny house infrastructure that people live in, where you can actually sustain the environment off of a microgrid. Becoming your own power broker is going to be very important in democracy and liberation. If you're talking about fighting white supremacy, that's one way you fight it. The Africans are really ahead in this. The impact of blockchain on supply chains in primary industries like agriculture and mining will ultimately create a Pan-African ecosystem of smart infrastructure. The efficiencies this creates will be further improved by AI-driven solutions and mesh networks of IoT applications. In turn, this will define the how, what, where of African infrastructure. We've been talking about this for a while now, that infrastructure, the investment is in the infrastructure when you start talking about the continent. That's what's going on. Okay. That's what's going on. All right, let me jump to the next article. All right. All right, this one is from CoinGeek.com. Blockchain jobs in Africa are rising, but skills are inadequate, still inadequate. As blockchain technology continues to revolutionize several industries, it has opened up several job opportunities. A decade ago, blockchain developers were unheard of, but now they are among the highest paid in the world. As CoinGeek has reported in the past, the demand for blockchain skills has mostly been higher than the supply. Most reports However, focus on the Western world. But what about in Africa? The rise of cryptocurrencies in Africa has been well documented, with South Africa leading in ownership as Nigeria leads in Bitcoin searches globally. However, the blockchain jobs market has been under the radar, mostly because the number of blockchain companies pursuing blockchain projects isn't all that high. This is not to say the continent hasn't embraced blockchain technology. Ray Youssef, the founder and CEO of crypto wallet and exchange Paxful, revealed that across Africa, developers are leveraging the technology to solve perennial challenges. Speaking to CoinGeek, he stated, in every trip we have in Africa, may it be South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, or Ghana, we meet several blockchain-based startups, many of which are optimistic in solving the financial problems they are experiencing. Angus Brown, the co-founder of Bitcoin Wallet, Centbee, clarified further regarding where the jobs are in Africa. What we are seeing growing is a demand for people who can create apps and services on top of the blockchain and not coding directly on the blockchain. This requires a good understanding of how blockchain works, but no need to create new ones. Across the globe, it has been the big tech and financial firms that have provided the most opportunities for blockchain developers. IBM, JP Morgan, KPMG, Deloitte, Microsoft, and Cisco are among the leaders in this field. Some governments have also tried their hand in blockchain. In Africa, state corporations haven't been as active in the field, Brown told CoinGeek. It has been private companies that provide the most opportunities, especially crypto wallets and exchanges, he stated. I think the big credible exchanges will continue to grow as there are many countries in Africa that have no local crypto exchange. And the big players will expand into these countries as the regulations open up. The regulators will want to see local pressure on local presence and employment of locals, so that we'll be start spreading the job opportunities around. There's still a lot to be done to push the African blockchain industry to the next level. For one, the government needs to get more involved, both by integrating the technology and implementing enabling regulations. If the government will nurture and motivate these young minds through the various incentives like subsidies or scholarships, this can help them innovate blockchain with even more and take this market to the next level. Youssef believes education. We need to educate regulators on the positive benefits of blockchain. We need to educate corporate CIOs as to the opportunities to improve their processes and keep training developers on how their skills can be linked to the blockchain business opportunities.
What's up, Mike?
Yo, what's going on, man?
Hey, I'm good. And the blockchain, what I want to say about blockchain, there are two parts of what I'm learning about the blockchain. It's the learning part and the implementation. So the blockchain learning, the understanding and learning part is important. Knowing the features of blockchain, knowing the hash, knowing the Genesis block, knowing all the important features, and knowing how to code it is important. But the next step is innovating. How to innovate the blockchain itself. So if you innovate, if you can innovate the blockchain itself by adding more features in it, or look at the existing features and trying to make it better. The goal is to basically make it more secure. You can look at that way or look at way to implement it. But the goal is understanding the blockchain process itself. That's the first step. The next step is what everybody should be looking at, is innovating. How do I make it better? How do I improve on it? Or how can I implement it somewhere where it can improve on that system. So that's what we should be looking at, that two process, understanding the blockchain itself. And the next step is improving on it or using it into a system like I'm using it in the cannabis. That's that's the part we should be looking at, not only understanding it, but how do we innovate and make it better?
Right, capitalization off of the existing code.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even how do we make the existing code better too?
Yeah.
Like if we want to integrate another feature into it, since there are a lot of features, there are like 5 features in it, can I put another feature in it, another code in it that makes it more secure? Or can I boost the other codes there, and can I make the other codes being written more better just to improve the security aspect of it?
Yeah, because basically you're treating it like a open source project.
Yes, treat it like a project, open source project. And that's, you ask, I don't even know the answers. I might ask someone who's a cybersecurity expert and ask his or her thoughts on how to encrypt the blockchain itself, what kind of codes he used that may be implemented in the blockchain. The goal is just to understand it first, understand how the code is written, how the features are written. Then the next step is, how do I innovate it? How do I either use it and apply it to our industry, or how do I innovate the whole blockchain itself? But that's the goal, to innovate, always trying to innovate that blockchain itself. Think of the way, that's the way you basically learn and improve on it itself.
Yeah, let me finish this article. Yusuf revealed our research has led us to find that there is a pool of talented young Africans who understand the technology and make use of it. We've managed to find hundreds of young qualified people in Africa who share a similar mission of financial inclusion. They were all familiar with the innovation of blockchain and Bitcoin and how it's slowly transforming our lives for the better. For Zempi, it has focused mainly on building apps that work on top of massively scalable BSV blockchain. As such, it doesn't seek blockchain developers mainly, rather it goes for talented Java developers who have strong API and integration experience. It then trains them on how the Bitcoin blockchain works. Brown concluded, we expect to see big growth in blockchain jobs in the next year, but not to code directly onto the blockchain, but rather to create apps and services that integrate with the largest and most capable blockchain networks. So people were asking the other day about, are there jobs over in Africa? Well, here it is. If you know blockchain, you will have a job. So it's not so much that, you see, there's a difference between how people from the West, so people from the United States in particular, look at jobs versus how Africans look at opportunities. Most Black people are in the United States are just taught to go work at some retail store or some other form of hard labor. The conversations that's happening now, based on my trip last week, everything is blockchain, 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 blockchain. In Nigeria, at that event, Nigerians were very much dominant in blockchain startups. If you look at the itinerary, if you know, it doesn't do it justice. You had to see the people on the ground having these conversations. They were very vocal in their support for utilizing blockchain as a necessary technology to advance these sort of old, decrepit systems that are from colonialism.
Yeah, the technology is quite advanced. It's simple to code. If you know how to code it, it's simple, but it does some complex things, and you can see the application into every single aspect. I've looked at it looking into streaming services. You can look at it into streaming services. You can look into security. You can look into different aspects of blockchain, and it's so diverse that there are a lot of opportunities you can basically get into. That's why I said you understand it first. You might, from there, you can even be a tech consultant for blockchain. So if you understand it fully and understand the implementation and understand, okay, now I've implemented, what else can I do with it? You understand AI, understand how to use AI, understand how to use drone technology. And you can integrate all those three, drone technology, AI, and blockchain. And you can integrate all of them. And
Right.
you can see how, once you learn it, you can see the complexities in, and you can see how to apply it.
Right. And the thing is that I want to get to Johnny Blaze's point in the chat. He says, do you see blockchain operators becoming independent contractors? See, that term is very is not being correctly used in the context that you're putting it in. It's out of context. A blockchain operator would actually just be lines of code. It wouldn't actually be a person, right? So it's not a human actually driving that. It's actually the code is driving itself. So when you say a blockchain operator, you might be talking about a blockchain developer, right? Or a blockchain architect or a blockchain engineer. Either way, I get the gist of your question, but the thing is, it's not so much about being an independent contractor, but everyone turning this opportunity to create their own startups. And so the term contractor is a more Western word, right? When you're talking about Africans, they're looking at this from a today's standpoint and going forward. They're looking at this from everybody who has an idea, who wants to create a business will be a startup. And so you'll have one group of guys, 2, 3, or 4, whatever it is, who have an idea. They're not doing this for contractual work. They're actually doing this to create a startup. They could be a startup just focused on one application and that's it. And that application might just be land appropriation forms as an application on the blockchain itself. And they'll make their money that way, right? Because that's a sort of a social impact need that's not actually a corrupt business, right? It won't be the next Enron. You won't have that problem on the continent going forward with blockchain. What happened with Enron was that there was no blockchain to really look at this stuff deeply. And so when you start looking at it from a African standpoint, you start to see that they're really rooted in their ideas are really rooted in startup culture. Because that's the culture that's being pushed now is startup. In the West, we don't really have that, at least from Black people's standpoint. The culture for Black people is hustle, right? A hustle is basically a unconventional way of managing your business or business operation. That's not acceptable in blockchain. It's not acceptable in fourth industrial technologies, emerging technologies. Hustle is not acceptable. Hustle culture versus startup culture is two vastly different ways of looking at things. And so the hustle culture needs to die and the startup culture needs to take precedence now. That's the only way you're gonna really keep up. Johnny Way says, I'm seeing young folks working for themselves. This is a great opportunity to become an entrepreneur. Yeah. It's the gig economy.
One of the best ways I've been seeing the utilization of blockchain, AI, and drone technology is in the basically disaster areas. Mm-hmm. Basically, how to navigate disaster areas that can be accessed by humans right now. Utilizing blockchain to collect data and utilizing blockchain to protect that data is viable. And also using AI to process how the environment is for logistics for a disaster area is also viable. So you can see the nuances in terms of where you can apply it to and how profitable it can be.
Right. So this one is from sidedev.net. Blockchain enabling safe drugs and banking in Africa. Spam this out. The ultra-secure validation technology known as blockchain could transform lives in Africa, the report says, providing access to safe cash for the 350 million without bank accounts and fighting the scourge of fake drugs. The report published this month, January 8th, by Brookings Institution, a US-based think tank, calls for African countries to make better use of technology such as artificial intelligence and blockchain as part of the fourth industrial revolution, which is characterized by the fusion of digital, biological, and physical worlds to successfully address the continent's social and economic needs. So that's the stuff that we've been talking about, right? Leveraging artificial intelligence and blockchain as part of the fourth industrial revolution. We've been banging this drum for a long time. Africa can use this fourth industrial revolution to chart its own industrial path with efficiency, reach out to other markets, develop new products, and diversify their economy, says Njuguna Ndungu, a co-author of the report and executive director of the African Economic Research Consortium. Blockchain, the transaction verifying technology usually associated with digital currencies such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, works by cross-checking each transaction against a series of records to ensure they all agree. These ultra-safe transactions are already making a difference in areas such as banking, healthcare, and pharmaceutical supply chains. Shireen Ramju, South Africa-based blockchain specialist and head of liquid crypto money, says that using blockchain has eradicated the need for relying on intermediaries to make financial transactions. So intermediaries would be, you know, at least from a Black American standpoint, it would be your Western Union, Check Cash, and MoneyGram. There are over 350 million unbanked people in sub-Saharan Africa alone, Ramju says. The financial services sector is one that will benefit immensely in Africa, especially the eradicating some financial hurdles, which will see more people banked and more people transacting across the continent like never before. So this is the point that we've been talking about for a long time, is that you have a lot of Black people here and on the continent who are unbanked, right? Capitalism can't survive if it has these sort of mechanisms in place that keep it from scaling. Well, if you have 350 million people that are unbanked, that's 350 million opportunities that are lost at expanding your the system. And so you can create a whole new system just based off of the unbanked, because they don't need physical cash. They just need cryptocurrency, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Litecoin, whether it's XRP. One of these digital currencies can be used to create a new banking demographic that is unbanked now. Could be banked in the next 6 months, just based off of the technology of blockchain. Ramju adds that in healthcare industry, blockchain can securely ease the transfer of patient records among health systems, both nationally and across borders, and boost the coordination of member health management, low transaction costs and risks, and even support medical tourism. It could also improve transparency in supply chain, providing minute details of every transaction of any pharmaceutical products, that ensuring that counterfeit medicines can be traced and eliminated. Ramju tells SciDev that African policymakers should prioritize investment in digital solutions and partners. The private sector enable the continent to compete with the rest of the world. According to the report, if Africa fails to recognize and capitalize on artificial intelligence, blockchain, and other opportunities the fourth industrial revolution brings, business risk falling further behind lower global competitiveness and enlarging the global digital divide. This is very true. This is very true. The business risk falling further behind. So if you're Black and you're ADOS or you're a foundational Black American, you could find yourself at risk of falling so far behind that it may be too late for you to keep up. After you have up until 2030. That's what the McKinsey report is saying. You have up until that. So that's the article. I agree with it 100%. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, this one's from Forbes.com. Blockchain fundraising can benefit African tech startups. African startups raised a record of $1.34 billion in venture capital funding in 2019, up from just under $200 million in 2015, according to WeTracker, a media firm focused on African entrepreneurship space. That's about a 46.3% increase on a compound annual growth rate basis. WeTracker estimates show that the total African venture funding has reached $725.6 million in 2018. So there's a lot of money moving around the continent, for startups, tech startups. They're seeing, some promising projects and startups that are taking place. The larger portion of the funds being raised by African startups comes from venture capitalist firms outside the continent. Given how the technology ecosystem in Africa is still in its nascent stage, coupled with how venture capital funds are typically directed toward growth, many early stage startups on the continent still struggle to raise early stage funding. And that's because there aren't sufficient local angel investors to fill this gap. For instance, in Nigeria, only about $1.5 million of the $133.5 million that the country attracted in 2018 came from Lagos Angel Network. Africa's largest angel network, according to the online business news publication Quartz. Nigeria attracts the majority of African venture capital, nearly 50%. This is very critical. Someone asked this the other day during, I think it was Tuesday, on one of our live streams that, well, who would you rank, from, in terms of technological supremacy or even dominance? Well, guess what? Nigeria attracts the majority of African venture capital, nearly 50% in 2019. Nigeria is a powerhouse when it comes to this. They have a lot of people, they have a lot of brain power, they have a lot of human capital moving around on a regular basis. So that's why they have 50% in 2019. The consensus within the African angel investing community during the 2018 Africa Early Stage Investor Summit was that the lack of clear exit opportunities is a major contributory factor. It is easy to invest money in Africa right now, but it's hard to make money in investing in. The key is to be exit centric. We only invest in entrepreneurs who are focusing on building sustainable businesses that can exit. Ben White, the CEO of Venture Capital for Africa, said, this conversation succinctly captures the challenges venture capital faces in Africa and why we need to keep working to strengthen and support the entire African venture system. All right. All right, let me get to the last item on the docket. All right, this one is from the AfricaReport.com. Blockchain becomes a part of everyday life in Kenya. I think this might be, no, it's not behind the paywall. Originating in an informal settlement in Mombasa, known as Bangladesh, the Bangla Pesa enabled a small group of traders to work within a new currency. Now, not surprisingly, Kenya, considered the cradle of mobile payment, is at the forefront of the development of blockchain. This technique is used to exchange goods, ensure product traceability, or even acquire government bonds. Blockchain is a way of storing and exchanging information through several hundred computers that form a network. Thus, dispersed, the information is protected. It requires a password held only by those concerned to be assembled, made, understandable, and used. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the blockchain platform allows people to create an account in 10 minutes instead of the usual 3 to 21 days for this type of debt, and the issuer can receive the funds daily instead of monthly. Its move to a blockchain system would allow for more transparency and trust, but also open the platform to international investment. As a result of the project, Kenya has been invited to several international forums and roundtables, such as the one in Paris in July 2018, organized by the United Nations Environment Program. Along with South Africa and Nigeria, the country is an African leader in the field. Since 2018, several incubators have been testing ideas in protected environment to anticipate the drawbacks of the technology in order to be able to regulate its use. One of these platforms targets only financial instruments. Under the aegis of the Capital Markets Authority, CMA, and the other Hudema white box is open to all types of projects. The initiative is sort of supported by think tank on blockchain and artificial intelligence, commissioned by the government in March 2018. Although there is still no law governing the blockchain, the government is closely monitoring this subject. So, of course, they would be. However, Kenya is moving really fast. But I did hear that Egypt is working on something. Egyptian nerds are working on stuff, as well as the Ugandan nerds. They're thinking about this stuff too. And so because of that, that's what's giving people a leg up. You would think that Black people in America who come from a first world nation would be the ones to really be driving a lot of this because it impacts them the most. But they are not, they are not at the table. They are absent. So that's the end of all the articles. I'd have no problem answering questions at this moment. Part of what, what drove me to the content to even go was to figure out what's going on over there from a technology perspective, from a fourth industrial perspective. What are they doing? I want to hear and speak to people face to face. I don't want to stand behind a computer and ask these questions. I want to actually get on the ground and actually have a conversation. And so the whole entire event was driven, I would say 2/3 of the discussion is floated around some form of blockchain or distributed ledger technology. And so because of that, like the flyer I sent, I added in the docket from Black Wealth Blockchain Conference in Atlanta that's going to happen next week. They said it's a $3 trillion market, or suspected to project it to hit $3 trillion. And they said, we want a piece of this pie too. I would agree with them. I cannot knock them. How can you knock that? It just makes more sense. And it's the main core behind the data privacy issue, data protection layer issue, things of that nature. That's what's actually going to help aid in the development of data protection, even from these various regulatory standards such as GDPR, CCPA, which is California Consumer Protection Act of 2020, went into effect last month. Massachusetts data protection laws, we have that here. And so there's going to be a lot of money is being pumped into the continent. Even from an angel investor standpoint, angel investors are spending more money investing into Africans than what the Small Business Association in America actually does for African Americans, or males for that matter too. And so you see these sort of differences and nuances in how poor Black people build resiliency versus how poor Africans do. And so startup culture is really in effect. Usually new trends and whatnot that shift culture around. If you would have asked before 2005, Rick Ross is hustling, nobody was rocking beards. It was unheard of to have a beard. That's a cultural trend now. Everybody has to have a beard. And so because of that, Black Americans have been very late to the game, or to the big dance, so to speak, when it comes to these sort of cultural shifts. You've been very late. And if you just have a conversation with people in the manosphere, you start to see and hear how they think. Barbershops, beauty supply stores, Uber, Lyft, and things of that nature. They're not really driving the fourth industrial emerging technologies. They're actually leveraging it for the same old playbook that didn't work 20 years ago, or the last generation. It didn't really work. And what's needing to happen now is that Black people need to be the ones driving the technology, writing the code, putting their rubber stamp on it, putting their backing on it. But the discussions that they were having over there was all about blockchain. 2/3 of it, all about blockchain. If it wasn't about blockchain, it was about startups. If it wasn't about startups, it was about AI. If it wasn't about AI, it was about cloud computing, machine learning, data science. Those are the conversations that they were having. So yeah, African, blockchain chat. I've said this in the past, and people have given me flack, but yeah, but Africans are Africans are probably a presidential cycle ahead of ADOS, FBA. Based on the articles that we have read, based on my experience on the ground, they're at least a presidential cycle ahead. And the reason why this is happening is because there is a disconnect between people wanting to use the technology and people wanting to drive the technology. And I think the materialism that happens in Black culture becomes about wearing somebody else's label to represent you, Hilfiger, Fendi, and things like that. Is not allowing these people to have big ideas, because innovation comes from complex conversations. And if you're not having a complex conversation, you cannot innovate anything. It's impossible. And so Black people are never having these sort of real deep dive conversations, because it's always centered around nonsensical discussions. Who slept with who? Who got the bag? Get the bag. Right? Very basic, rudimentary sort of ideas that are not sustainable over the long haul. And like the article said, the other article said, you risk falling behind permanently if you cannot catch on to this type of stuff. By 2030, if you do not have some form of literacy on this, you are screwed. You're already blockchain as a branded system had come around 2007, 2008, has been made largely the face of cryptocurrencies and whatnot. It started in 2008. If you don't have, 2008 and 2030 is a long time. It's a long time. And so you're playing catch up to something that already, by 2030, you're playing catch up to something that started in 2008. So you risk falling behind almost permanently, because if you do not have the skill sets to actually be a part of the gig economy or work for a corporation or be a partner with these corporations through a startup culture, you're screwed. You're very much screwed. You would be reduced to menial tasks, such as loading and unloading boxes, from a U-Haul truck or something like that. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And so you do have some Black people who are familiar with blockchain, but it's not enough, right? I should be able to walk into a room and people actually know what I'm talking about without me having to explain it. I'm saying from a Black person's perspective, because the literacy rate is so low. So what I see happening here is that, you have African Blockchain Alliance. I think that's a not-for-profit group. Oh, sorry, African Blockchain Alliance. Sorry, ABA. I don't know why I said African American. But they're using that as a consortium. And within the consortium, what's going to happen here is everybody else who wants to adopt a new technology, for that matter, will have to go through that. And they would have to look at the policies and the regulatory markings and things of that nature. So Rainy Woman asked a question. So would you agree that we need to have more conversations like this, even in casual situations and events? Yeah. When I was over there, a casual conversation is about blockchain. That's how they see it. Whining blockchain. Sip some wine, talk about blockchain. That's the sort of stuff that they were talking about. It's difficult, for Black people to really understand this type of stuff because it's so foreign to them to actually, because they consider this nerd stuff. They consider it to be, lame and uncool. But in reality, this is what's going to get you paid. This is what's going to actually have you create a different sort of environment as well as create a different sort of legacy. So yes, I hope that answers your question, Random Woman. What's going on, Richard Victor Dixon, man? Yeah, I've been just rambling my mouth, man. I'm not going to ramble anymore. Docket is the description beneath the video for you to follow along with, and there'll also be. Let me see if anybody's trying to get on first. No. All right, just hit the like button if you can, and also check the community tab. We do post things on here every week. So that being said, peace and shalom.